It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. There's Ian Rivers. And Ian, yeah, eh, eh. Like there is, it's just this is gonna be a rough show. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, the vibes are down around Beaver Nation right now. One of the tougher weekends, but it, you know, it'll happen. You get deep enough into a season, and you're bound to have a couple weeks like this. But yeah, we'll get
Yeah,
into
not
all of it over the next 40 minutes or so here.
Yeah, I mean, we might as well start with just kind of the football game, playing Minnesota State, going down to Mankato. Of course, we were there. If you followed along on the Beaver Banter socials, we were hanging out and doing the thing. It was cool. We got to go down there and go to a game, which, I haven't been to a Bemidji State football game in over a year, so it was cool. And the first time ever going as a road fan. So it was cool to get to go down and check that out and be down there and all that stuff. And I will say there was a great representation of Bemidji State fans. I know there was the fan bus. I know there was a good contingent that traveled all the way out to Colorado and to Texas. So obviously going to Mankato was really easy to kind of gather the troops. And almost the entire visitor side of Blakesley Stadium in Mankato was covered in green and white.
Yeah, that was the first thing I was going to bring up myself. I think it was probably 40% of the entirety of the fan base that was there, maybe 35 if you count all the people standing kind of in the end zone on the hill up there, and the exact amount. But 35%, that's quite a lot. I was a little surprised when we stepped into the stadium and saw that much green on the visiting side of the stadium. I think really the only section on our half that we were sitting on was the section right next to us that was mostly spotted with purple, with some green in there. But yeah, like you said, a great contingency of traveling fans. Of course, it's not that far, like probably 5 hours from Bemidji, which is far, but considering, the other two games we played were in San Angelo, Texas, and in Gunnison, Colorado, this was a short jaunt for the Beaver faithful, and they showed up. A lot of former football players and other athletes as well. We saw the likes of Brendan Bolio. Brandon Alt was there as well. There was tons of Beaver fans there. And it was a fun game to be at, regardless of the outcome, which, of course, if you're listening to this, you probably know the outcome of the game. But the Beavers did end up losing 23-27 in this game, but it really didn't diminish the fact that it was a fun game and an exciting game to be at. And it really just stinks because it's one of those that you go to and it's like, man, I'm going to remember this game, but it would just be so much better if the Beavers were able to pull it out. And, of course, we'll get into why or why not here in a second. But, I mean, just overall a very fun game to be at, fun atmosphere there. And honestly, I couldn't have asked for much more other than maybe one play to go a little different in this one.
Yeah, I mean, let's just get into it. One play. I mean, really, that's the game. And I know we obviously we rode down together, and we rode down with a couple other people in our kind of circle. And really, the vibe from that point on in the game and on the way home, and all we could really talk about. You could talk about this play, this part of the game, that part of the game. It all came down to that fumble Bemidji State had on the goal line by Connor Carver when it looked like if Bemidji State scores that touchdown, not that it's game over, but man, they win the game. They do win the game if that happens. It's a fumble, bounces, the oblong-shaped football bounces in the way of Minnesota State. So it bounces in a way that only a defensive back can grab it and runs all the way into deep into Bemidji State territory, runs all the way inside the 15. Mankato eventually scores a touchdown after that, and it's what propelled them to eventually take the lead. And there's all sorts of ways, ifs, ands, ways you can try and spin the game. But that really is the play. I've been thinking about it since it happened, Ian. I mean, outside of that fumble, that's really, and I don't mean to like dig on the fumble, but like that's just everything in the game revolves around that at that point.
Yeah, it's definitely, if you could, have the superpower to go back in time and change one play, and then the butterfly effect happens from there, you would say, take away that fumble, right? And here's the thing. the Beavers are not in this situation without Connor Carver. So it's
Right.
not
That should also be
necessarily
said.
a detriment to him. He had 140 yards rushing. Dude, the guy runs. I don't even
Half of them
know
coming on one
who to
play.
yeah. What was it? 78
70.
yards from the 22. I think so. Like, yeah, over half his yards on the one play was a massive run. He had a couple other runs that were absolutely massive. I believe on that same drive, he did a shake and bake to get an extra like 10 or 15 yards. The dude runs like a combination of a running back and a tight end. He's impossible to bring down, but he's got this footwork. It's incredible. And yes, there was the fumble, and that was the main turning point of the game. But you're not in that situation without what he's able to bring on the ground with the physicality as well. And it's just unfortunate that that's what it came down to. Now, with all that being said, the Beavers still had the game in the palm of their hand, even with that fumble. They had
still had an
3
opportunity.
chances from the 4-yard line. The defense gave the ball back to them with a minute and 15, minute and 10 seconds left with a chance to drive. And they drove down the field, and we kind of talked about they almost got too close because they kind of condensed the field on themselves.
They ended up going
the
from like the
5-yard
15-yard line. Yeah, and they got inside the 5.
Yeah, and it's so it makes it really hard to throw the ball. You don't really have a rushing threat when you don't have a timeout.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. No timeouts. There's under like 20 seconds left, so you really can't afford to run the ball and keep them off their toes that way. And so it really just made it difficult for the wide receivers to gain separation that they needed when really Mankato could just drop like 8 guys into coverage, double every receiver that was out there, and really just not let anybody beat them. And of course, unfortunately, the Beavers weren't able to capitalize on one of those 3 opportunities from inside the line. Honestly, if I could change any one of those 3 plays, I might honestly give Carver the ball on 4th and goal. Listen, if you don't get it there, yeah, I know you could technically get a first down if you get inside the 1-yard line, but like you either have to get out of bounds at the 1-yard line or like the clock's going to start running way too quick to get a reset on that anyways, right? So honestly, yeah, he fumbled early in the game and it really cost you, but he ran so well outside of that one. I might put him in there and just say, hey, this has been our best play today outside of Sam McGath played really well in this game, and we'll touch on him and the drive he had where he had a couple of amazing throws, especially the touchdown. I maybe honestly would have just considered doing that. You know, we saw it. They're bracketing every receiver on the field. I might have put Connor in there and said, hey, here's your chance to redeem yourself. We know you fumbled a little bit ago. That might have been the only thing I could have seen. But other than that, I mean, hey, it's just unfortunate that it had to come down to that. You know, the scoop and score giveth and the scoop and score taketh away. Of course, it wasn't a score because of the amazing play by Bryce Peters that unfortunately couldn't save a touchdown because the defense did end up getting scored on that drive anyways. But yeah, it was a phenomenal game, man. And the Beavers, the thing that hurts the most is just that it was there for the taking on a number of occasions. And like you said, I've strayed very far from your original point of that game wouldn't have been over. But even if you score and or even if you get stopped, because that was 3rd down, I believe, when Connor fumbled. Even if you get stopped there and Mantelli can punch through a field goal, you're up 5. And then if Mankato goes and scores a touchdown, you don't have to get a touchdown on the ensuing drive. You can just kick a field goal and get into field goal range and go up.
I almost wonder too in that spot if Bemidji State wouldn't, if it was 4th and goal at like the 4, the 3, if they just go for it. If they just go for it, because yeah, exactly. Like I get what you're saying, and that's probably true. And I obviously we don't know what Bolte's thought process was because we didn't get a chance to see it. But like I wonder if they would have went for it, and if you don't get it, well, now Mankato's got to drive 96 yards to go and do anything.
That's very interesting because we talked about that exact situation, right? On the ride down, why didn't the Cardinals do that against the Vikings? They took the 6-point lead instead of just saying, screw it, let's go for the kill shot right here. So I actually think that may have been what Bolte did. And it depends on how that play would have ended. You know, if Connor could have maybe falling forward to the 2-yard line, maybe it's completely different than, if he goes backwards and now it's from the 5-yard line. Maybe they just say, all right, let's just not chance it and we can still get the ball back, whatever. But yeah, at the end of the day, just tough, man. Just tough. It was a tough game.
It's tough, by the way, because Bemidji State was in the driver's seat up until that point. And that's what's also the inflection point. That's when you really felt like, okay, Mankato's kind of like they're starting to grab hold of momentum. Isn't real until it is. You know what I mean? Like, and that point, you just kind of felt it shift because Bemidji State was in control all game. Mankato missed a field goal early. Beavers got a field goal early. The offense was moving for Bemidji State. Obviously, Connor Carver had that big run. It felt like everything Bemidji State was doing, it wasn't always working to 100%, whatever. But also at the end of the day, you looked up and you're like, we're winning. And at halftime, we put a post out on the Beaver banner pages. And we said, you know what? We're up at halftime. Doesn't matter. We'll take, like, if you would have said pregame, hey, Bemidji State up by 3 at half, we'd be like, okay, we'll take that option 10 times out of 10 rather than what's behind door number 2. And like they were controlling that game and it just shifted. Now, credit to Minnesota State. Their program's been there before. Their program does stuff. It's 2 good teams. Like you don't lose to anybody bad when you're in the Elite 8. You know what I mean? So like the other team has agency. The other team wasn't just going to lay down and die. And like Bemidji State didn't do a week ago when they were out in Colorado, they just kind of hung in there and waited for a big play to happen in their direction. And it's what happened. Going back to Ian, you mentioned too, they got the football back. Now and again, this is so nitpicky and I'm not trying to say like, this is the exact thing. So I'm just making an observation, but the defense was great all day, but just at the end, it felt like they were wore down just enough. Mankato was able to get just 1 too many first downs where Bemidji State had to use all their timeouts and they didn't have any on that drive. If Bemidji State has a timeout or 2 on that drive, maybe they have a chance to punch it in. That's not to blame the defense. That's just to say, like, if one thing goes differently, the complete complexion of it changes. And again, for Mankato, they let Bemidji State eat up all that field. But again, there was a point to where that field got too small. Like we talked about, the Bemidji State had it on the 15. You do take that play. Like you take it, you try and get as close as you can. There's a chance that one breaks for a touchdown, but you're down inside the 5. And now everything is so congested. You can't run the football and you're just hoping that something can happen and a guy can get open. And it just didn't happen. There's just a lot of traffic going through. And if you have a timeout, you can maybe run the football and do all that stuff. But also this is where, and again, I go back and forth on this issue, but everybody loves to rip prevent defense until prevent defense is actually used. And that's kind of, Bemidji State did get the yards. They were at the goal line, but eventually things just clogged up and, the time was off the clock and eventually the clock worked against them. And I'm not saying prevent defense is great, but like, this is why teams do it, because kind of just puts the other team's back up against the wall and it took them too much time to eat it up. And I don't know, man, like there's so many things in this game, but because it was a great game, there was like last week, they won and there were so many things happening and this thing and that thing. They lost. It's a tough one, but man, it was fun. It was a fun game. It's one that I'm going to think about for a while, like you talked about, because of how different it could have been and how it felt like up until early in the fourth quarter, it really felt like it was Bemidji's game to lose and they just couldn't come away with it. And now Mankato they avoid Ferris in the national semifinals, if I read that bracket correctly, and they get to go on and do their thing and whatever. An NSIC team gets to go. I don't know.
We talked about that too. Is that,
yeah,
honest to God, like this is not a disappointing result, right? Because this is the furthest this program has ever gotten before, right? To the national quarterfinals.
And was on the doorstep to the semifinals.
The shittiest part about it is that it just had to be to Mankato. That's the only, if you lose this game the exact same way, but that emblem on that helmet is not a Maverick or even,
if it's School of Mines, if it's ASU, if it's anybody that they play.
ASU Pueblo. By the way, Morgan Fox, Chargers defensive lineman, apparently played there. He said it last night on the SNF broadcast, and I'm like, That would have been an interesting tidbit had we actually matched up with them to bring up on the podcast.
We've hit
So
our
I did it
Chargers quota
anyways.
for the episode.
We have. I will leave it at that instead of talking about anything else that happened last night. But yeah, I mean, when you look at this game, there isn't necessarily one thing that, this team did very poorly that would have lost them the game. And honestly,
Right.
I may have misspoken because I said earlier, if there's one play that you can go back in time and change, I said it would be the fumble. Obviously, that's the wrong answer. They still had the game. You changed the 4th down and goal. You changed that to a touchdown, and the Beavers still win with the fumble anyway. So, that was kind of stupid of me to say because they would have still won had I changed the other play. So, maybe it's my fault. But,
and here's
Sam McGath, by the way, 19 of 25, 149 yards and a touchdown in this game, especially on the touchdown drive to Drayton Lehman. There was 2 throws in particular on that drive where we looked at each other. We're like, wow, that was not like in between a couple of defenders on the sideline for a big play, a big first down, and then even the touchdown throw. It was a classic outbreaking route. Lehman found some space behind the defender, and the ball was perfectly placed up and over the top.
And I believe McGath was throwing it from the far hash mark too. So that had to travel through.
Yeah,
that had to travel a little bit. And those throws are not easy. And those throws are when you watch on a stream, like we have to most of the season, you go, oh, nice. There you go. Found the guy. That's his throw. When you see those throws in person, and you see, in the NFL, if you listen to NFL people talk, they always say layering the football. Can you get that throw over the linebacker, but underneath the safety, all that stuff? He layered a couple throws and they looked pretty, and he did have a good game. And yeah, those throws are huge, and you don't always appreciate them until you can see them in person. So he played a really nice game.
Yeah. Isaiah Johnson with a really nice interception in the first half as well. I believe on maybe the first drive of the game.
Yeah, very first drive. Because then it set up Bemidji State to kick a field goal. Mantelli drilled it.
Yeah, Mantelli's been money, from the field goal perspective at least. And it's just it sucks, man, because this is not the way that you want your senior class to go out, who has honestly done nothing but succeed since they've been here. These are the guys that have gotten you to 4 straight playoffs and won 5 playoff games now in their tenure. And it's a crummy way for them to have to end on a rival's home field the way that you did, with the game in your hands at the end, and unfortunately wasn't able to pull it out. But they battled hard. They didn't go out there, and that was the one thing, we're like, at the very least, it would stink to just come all the way down here and to get completely run over, and they're a team that can hang with these teams at this point. And
you got your money's worth going to that game.
We talked about it before the season. We talked about it after last season, how this team is not just a quarterback, right? It's Division II football. Oh, you guys had a good quarterback? Yeah, that makes any team good at this level. Well, look at Mankato. Jack Strand is pretty good, and they still went 6-5 this year, maybe 7-4, and they were extremely volatile. You've got to have the rest of the team put together around that, and the Beavers do. And it's going to be very interesting now, because now you have a situation where Sam is going to be leaving, and you have really no experienced quarterbacks coming in. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the quarterback room next season. I have my theories, but we'll see. The transfer portal and everything can make that kind of foggy. But going forward, I don't expect this team to take massive steps back. It's a very, very good season for confidence building for this team. And like we said, just because you lost this game does not diminish the season you had as a whole. To be able to go and be 5-3, and your season is dead. It's on ice, and you don't care. You battle through it. You keep going, and it's just incredible that they even got to the playoffs. It's incredible that they, won that game in Colorado last 10 days ago or whatever it is at this point. And to get to this point, it was an incredible season. Another 10-win season for this team. It didn't end the way you wanted it to, but hey,
if you would have told again,
really
let's go again. We've said this before in other episodes, but go back to when they lost to Winona, And if you say, hey, they're going to play in the national quarterfinal game in Mankato, and it's going to go down to the wire, you would not, we would not have believed each other if we would have said that. No. For them to rally and play the way they did over the last month, 2 months, has been huge for this program, and it's awesome. So you got to tip your cap to the guys. And I want to say one last thing on the fumble. We said this, and I mentioned this on our car ride back. We said on last week's show, we were talking with Alex about this football game. Fumbles are fluky. They're just fluky. Do you think, Colorado, when they went down to Gunnison, do you think that team on the other sideline, do you think that they were they take care of the football? And fumbles are fluky. So, yeah, as big as that fumble was for Bemidji State, it's not to say that what was Carver doing? He was being careless with the football and he was this or that. Maybe if you watch it 5 times, and I've only seen it live. I've not seen any replays of that anywhere. So maybe I don't know. But from what my perspective is, fumbles are fluky, and it just happened at a very inopportune time. And so this is not to say that, and I think we've done a good job of saying it, but I think we've done a good, I think overall, there's nothing really that can happen. Sometimes the fumble just happens. And overall, that's going to be one of the defining plays of the game, but doesn't take away from anything. Bemidji State had a chance to be playing in the national semifinals, and they're not. It stinks, but I think now's the time to eulogize that. Every good season they stack together makes this program better, because it shows that this wasn't just a one nucleus of players kind of carried the program. You get kind of one, for lack of a better term, fluky group of players that play really well, and you can't recreate that. And I think Bolte and company have shown that they can get good players into this program. I've seen some of the recruits Bemidji State is coming in, through kind of watching high school football here and there. There's some good players coming in on this next year's class. It's going to be all right. And as we've seen already, there are some players on this team that could play. I'm excited to see more of Carver next season, to see what he can do with this football program, whether Absolutely. It's as the starting quarterback, whether it's in a gadget, whether it's whatever, that guy can ball. And there are some other guys on that team that can, and they're going to be coming back and making plays. So, this is just a long-winded way of saying sucks to end this way, but there's nothing you can do. And this team is still really good. This team will still continue to be really good. And when you talk about NSIC football, you talk about Mankato, sure. You'll talk about Augie, but you talk about Bemidji State too, because not only do they win in the regular season, they win in the postseason. And it's just been fun. Bemidji State football is fun. And it stinks that we have to wait until August to get to watch it again.
Yes, absolutely. How do you think programs like Mankato and Augustana get to the point they're at? How do you think Alabama got to the point they're at? Obviously, they hired one of the greatest college football coaches of all time. That helps. But you have sustained success, right? You can't just have the one season where, you go and you make a huge run. Think Gopher football, right? That 2019 season where they go 11-2 and, they slipped up against Wisconsin and Iowa, but that was a phenomenal season for the program. But they and COVID came at an inopportune time for them as well, and that might have had something to do with it, but they couldn't stack a couple of seasons like that, similar to that, on top of each other. And so it's all right, cool. That was just a flash in the pan from this program. And all these top recruits don't really respect that. And they're like, oh, well, we're still going to go to the Wisconsins and the Michigans and the Ohio States. And this is how you build that. This is absolutely a key point. I feel we've said it so many times, but that's the main reason that having success this season was so important, because now you've proven that you are not just the flashy quarterback and the wide receivers and the weapons and the offense. You've proven that you're a good program with a great head coach. And it's going to be fun, because I don't think that, they're going to go anywhere. Like we said, next season, it'll be more of the same. I'm assuming more success, but yeah, it'll be interesting. One more thing I have is just, you brought up Carver and how he's going to be used next year. And, it'll be very interesting, because we talked about a little bit, you got to throw with him at some point, right? Because it's amazing how he can do what he can do when it's like, all right, he's in the game. They're going to run. Like they don't not
He
run
was
when
what
he's in the
McGaff
game.
was a year ago.
Right. And so it's like, at some point, maybe they pull the rabbit out of the hat and make a big, a throw, on 4th and 1 or something. And it's
Right.
like,
Like you take a step, you get the ball out of the shotgun, you take a step forward, you go back, and then you throw like a little tight end pop or something like
and
that.
I'm sure they've been thinking about this too, but it's like, all right, if you're going to have sustained success with that, I feel like at some point you have to make him a throwing, threat as well, at least a little bit. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how he is utilized in this offense next year. For all the seniors, offensive and defensive, congrats on fantastic careers. It sucks you had to go out that way, but at the same time, 5 playoff wins, minus maybe people that transferred in. But for the seniors that have been here for at least 4 years, it's been a hell of a ride. And we want to congratulate you on that, as we kind of wrap up our football conversation here.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've pretty much said what needs to be said. It stinks, but life goes on, and we'll just wait for the 2025 Bemidji State football team come August. So congrats, guys. And I just want to say before we're done, we do get love from, people, whether it's like actual people on the football team or football adjacent. We really like this ride is fun, and we appreciate you guys listening on for the playoff ride. And listening and following along and liking our stuff on socials. We appreciate it, and we hope that you stick around throughout the rest of the athletic year and in the next football season too. It's a lot of fun seeing this Beaver Banter community grow, and a lot of it has been because the football team has been so successful, and people want to jump on this ride and talk about it together, and it's been fun. So, just so you guys know who are close to the football program or adjacent or whatever proper term you want to use, we appreciate you guys listening.
100%. 100%. It would not be as fun to do this without fans of the team, parents of players, players themselves, and of course the team's success definitely helps us. So we want to help by doing what we can to get people interested in this team and knowing about this team and how good they are and all teams of Beaver sports. So yeah, like you said, it's just fun. It's fun to cover the team and especially when they have success like this, to get to go down even in a loss, to see the team play like that was super fun. So you want to talk about some hockey, CJ?
Maybe before we get into hockey, let's first touch on some basketball. Or I guess we're doing a bit of an on-air production meeting here as we're recording. But I mean, let's just cover football quickly. Or football, geez, we just spent a half hour doing that. I don't know how much more we could say. That's just gonna bum me out. But let's take a look into basketball. The first weekend of NSIC play, and 2 games for Bemidji State. They go 0-2 on the weekend, and they lose by a combined 3 points. Brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, just, you lose to number 20 Minot State on the road. You lose by 2. It's valiant effort. That's okay. I'm not concerned about that loss as much as I'm concerned about mainly just the way that game ended. And Ian, just kind of, how did that one end against Crookston that you felt kind of maybe is just like not the ideal scenario?
Man, it just felt like situationally they weren't prepared for that situation. I mean, so the game, I turned it on at the end after the hockey game ended and watched the final, 2 minutes or so of the game. Bemidji had the ball, I believe, with the shot clock turned off. And, they made one too many passes. You dump the ball in, and they broke the press, which was the main thing. They broke the press in the backcourt, and they were able to get the ball into the front court. And then, of course, you have numbers when you break the press. And so they dump it down inside as if just lay the ball up, but there's no point to lay the ball up. You have a 1-point lead. Don't give the ball back to Crookston. And I can't remember who it was down there, but he realized that. He's like, well, I'm not going to shoot it. We just want to dribble the clock out. But in doing so, he kind of tried to pass it back to the top. There was a deflected pass. The ball goes out of bounds. It's Bemidji State's ball still, but now you have to inbound, and you turn it over on the inbound. So if you would have just stopped and held the damn ball, and let somebody foul you, you would have gone to the free throw line and gotten your shots instead of turning the ball over back to Crookston. And then there was a foul. I thought it was a little bit of a ticky-tack call, but there was a foul called on the Beavers. Crookston hits their 2 free throws, and the Beavers cannot come back down and hit a game-winning shot. So it just felt like they mismanaged that situation a little bit at the end of that game. And then, honestly, I don't know what happened at the end of this game here against Minot, but again, to lose by 2, these are games that you've got to be able to like pull out, if you want to compete and be in the, top 4, I believe, are the teams that get buys at the end of the season. These are tough games. Now, Minot is ranked 20th in the country, so they're a good team, but it would have been an even better win, to go on the road and to
right. It make you forget about the Crookston game. You could just be like, that stinks, but we got the Minot win. We're 1-1 on the weekend. We'll just go, we'll figure it out. I think the stat of the game really is the fact that Bemidji State had 17 turnovers compared to Minot's 10. And when you lose by 1 possession, it just kind of comes back to haunt you.
Yep, absolutely. Disappointing. Disappointing for sure. Still no sign of John Sutherland in the starting lineup. We did talk to Alex just last week, and he made us believe that John is not that far away. But of course, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to turn around and play 3 days after we talk to Alex. But hopefully, we can get him back soon because the team's playing well without him. And I know that basketball can be a bit finicky, sometimes, you see it with John Morant on the Grizzlies. It's like they have a better record without him in there. Like usually teams are better when their best players are on the court. And John Sutherland coming back will hopefully help this team, win close games like this because he is a phenomenal player. So unfortunate for the Beavers to drop 2 of 2 this weekend, especially the way they did. But they get another chance. They're coming home to play Northern State and Minnesota State University Moorhead this weekend. Moorhead's been a pretty good basketball program over the last few years. So we'll see what the Beavers can do. Hopefully they can pick up at least a split to kind of get that winning momentum back and dive deeper into NSIC play here.
Yeah, the early conference schedule has not been kind to Bemidji State. Northern State's has always been a nice basketball program, and obviously Minnesota State Moorhead has always, in recent history especially, been really good. Bemidji State has been able to play Moorhead better than most, so that could be something to think about. But yeah, we'll just have to see kind of how that shakes out there. Flipping over onto the women's side, they went to overtime against Crookston in Crookston and lost 69-63, and then lost against Minot 57-47. Taking a look at the kind of end of game stats when you look at it for Bemidji State in that overtime loss on Friday night and kind of seeing what kind of led to them falling in that one, because first conference game, a good chance for them to go into and to get that first win. And I think again, turnovers, 20-9 is the final ratio. Bemidji State committed 20 turnovers, Minot State Minnesota Crookston 9. And overall, that kind of feels like it was the decider, but I don't, in the overtime, you get outscored 8-2. And Bemidji State, by the way, had the lead going into the fourth quarter, and they get outscored 24-17 in that part as well. So be with it what it is. It's kind of how that game shakes out. But I think overall, it felt like those games against Crookston for both the men's and women's team, the more you look back and they were right there to get that first conference win, to get it on the road, and to drop those games. It's not season ending by any stretch of the imagination, but just ones that you're going to go, shoot, that would have been really important and just really nice to get that first conference win off the back early and kind of start to stack them on top of each other. And now it kind of hangs over you, especially when they're going to play Northern and Moorhead next weekend, and it'll have some same issues.
Yeah, precisely. It's just a little disappointing to see them blow that 7. It was only a 7-point lead heading into the fourth quarter, so it's not like they blew some astounding lead, and it's
right.
record breaking. But yeah, to lose to, at the very least, these games were both within 10 points. So that's something to maybe look at and say, all right, well, the team was competitive in both of these games, and I know that Minot and Crookston are not necessarily the pinnacle of women's basketball on that side. But hey, we don't expect this Beaver team to be contending for a conference championship this year. So it is nice to see them at least competing on the road with some of these teams in the middle of the pack so far through the NSIC. And, we'll see what they can do. Like you said, this weekend, they've got the same schedule the men do. And right now, Northern State 4-4, 1-4, 1-1 in the conference, and MSU Moorhead 4-4, 2-0 in the conference. So we'll see. They're at home. Hopefully they can pick up their first conference win of the season. That would be pretty cool. Get it out of the way early and maybe start building on some of that momentum, just like the men's team is going to try to do.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, some positivity for Bemidji State athletics. Looking in women's track and field, Bemidji State wins the battle for the paddle at St. Cloud State over the weekend, getting 61 points against St. Cloud State's 42 on the track. Ava Werner finished third in the mile race with a time of 5:58.6 on the 400 meter. Josie Aiken took second with a time of 1:03. McKenna Frazier rounded out the top three with the time of 1:06. Three Beavers ended up in the top five in the 60-meter hurdles, with Karina Olson taking it all at 8.95 seconds. And a couple other things as well, but a little bit of positivity there with the women's track and field, just to get some good vibes going with Bemidji State athletics, because it felt like it hasn't been there up to this point in the episode. So we'll see what they can do. Next week, they play the Dakota Alumni Classic in Fargo as the indoor season continues for track and field. All right, Ian, I think it's time. Let's talk a little men's hockey here. It was a great night on Friday night, 4-2 victory, going to Sault Ste. Marie, get the win. And then Saturday night was just a collective, just kind of every time you turned your head, you're like, what is this game? It was just weird, man.
Yeah, we tried to do what we could because, of course, that game started like right as we're driving home from Mankato. So we did what we could to watch and understand. And then, of course, the Discord, to plug that really quick, was helpful in providing us insight that we otherwise wouldn't have had on the game and some of the intricacies behind it on Saturday. But yeah, Friday's game was good. I mean, a 4-2 win, you outshot Lake State 34-25 in this game. And honestly, you played really well compared to them. If they weren't on the power play, which was a theme this weekend, I'm not sure exactly how many penalties the Beavers took over the first.
Too many.
Yeah, it looks like there was 8 total penalties this weekend compared to, I guess, 7 for Lake State. So not too big of a disparity over the course of the weekend. But yeah, Lake State's power play was working, and that was the main problem over the course of the weekend. Yeah, it's just ugly on Saturday. But Friday was pretty ugly too, at least in terms of how the goals were scored. Sasha Teleguin opened the scoring for Lake State. Austin Jopi and Jake McLean answered back with a couple of goals that were just greasy. I mean, every one of these goals felt like it was just getting poked in, on rebounds, and they were really gritty goals. They had to review a couple of them because you couldn't tell whether they actually went in or not. It was crazy to see. Kirkland Irie got a shorthanded goal quickly following Jake McLean's goal. And then, just another power play goal for the Lakers. And then Patrick Satisari, who played really well in that game. I believe it was him, Dante Lawson, and Kirkland Irie that all had 2-point nights on Friday in what I thought was a really good game. And you turn around on Saturday, and penalties early, I guess, is what the storyline is. BSU took 3 penalties in the first period. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and bitch at the refs, but when you've got Jared in the Discord talking about how bad an interference call was, he's pretty unbiased. He does his job very well for the Pioneer, and it's pretty rare to see him talking about how that was one of the worst calls he's ever seen. And then, I mean, it's hard to get back in the game when, you started off strong. Eric Martin gets the first goal in the game. And then, of course, you give up a shorty because our power play, man, we talked about it with Lucas last week. It's like, okay, statistically, it's not bad, but dude, when they're bad, they're awful. Like they can't get anything going. This isn't even. We
Well, and they had
forgot the
issues with
whole
that on Friday night too.
Friday was horrible, dude. They had to start the third period. They had a 5-on-3 for 2 full minutes, and then they had 3 more minutes of a major penalty. They could not score a single goal to try to extend their lead. That was only 1 goal at the time. That's going to be a problem when you're not playing Lake Superior State. When you get into tournament time, and we're lucky we play in the CCHA, so we don't have to play a whole lot of teams that are like a ton tougher than LSU or LSSU. But like, dude, when you play teams like, Minnesota and North Dakota, granted, we've already done that and we had success in those series. So it seems trivial to sit here and squawk about it now. But dude, this power play is atrocious, dude. They can't get it figured out. They cannot seem to score goals. When they do, it looks beautiful and it works really well, but they're just so inconsistent. And yeah, it just wasn't enough to get back into the game. Sasha Teleguin added what I believe are his second, third, and fourth goals with a hat trick performance on Saturday. And, when you look at the grand scheme of things, we talked about it last week. This is another kind of one of those places that the Beavers just don't really historically have a lot of success in. Last year was worse than this. And I guess that's something to take away from it where, you got worked last year and at least you picked up the 3 points this year. 3 points is not a detrimental loss to Lake Superior State. Right now, what your concern is that Minnesota State is kind of running away with the conference early in the season. And it is a long season. There's still, we haven't even hit the new year yet. So you never know what could happen with that program, injuries and cold streaks, but they seem to be running away with this. At the very least, I do feel like the Beavers are going to be in contention for home ice at the very least, and I do think that some things will get ironed out. They haven't had a super easy schedule yet. I mean, yeah, they've played Ferris State, but it was on the road and they played St. Thomas. So that's pretty easy for this season, at least. St. Thomas has been pretty down on their luck, but it's not been a favorable matchup, to start the season. The Beavers are currently 5th in the CCHA. They have some ground to make up. It would have been a massive win to get a sweep over Lake Superior State. They didn't get that. So they gained a little on Lake State. Lake State lost a little, but so did we this weekend. It's going to be very important this next week against Michigan Tech to get some points. But overall, I mean, yeah, maybe if the refs don't put you in a deep hole there in the first period, or maybe if maybe if you yourself don't give them an opportunity to make the call, you can't completely blame them. But if you could have gotten 4 or 5 points from this weekend instead of 3, you feel a lot better. But, like we've said the whole season, they're not digging themselves a hole that's going to be impossible to dig out of. They're not pulling what St. Thomas is pulling right now. And, they're still in a pretty favorable position where if they get hot, after New Year's, they definitely could potentially go on another run here. So it's not necessarily the end of the world. It's just a little disappointing.
It's just kind of like you dropped a little and it's not going to kill you in the end or likely won't. But yeah, it's just ones that at the end of the year, you might look back and go that, losing points that night definitely didn't help the cause. But like you said, the schedule kind of lightens up for the rest of the year. Michigan Tech comes to town this weekend and then you play UMD on New Year's Eve. Then you have an exhibition on January 3rd against Manitoba, all at home. So Bemidji State does not have to go to the play a road game in a month. January 10th at Bowling Green is their next game after that, and it's their next road game as well. So they have some time here, like you said, to figure some things out, and Michigan Tech will be a good way to kind of get things back on the right track. At the very least, get some revenge for how that Mason Cup game ended a year ago. UMD, your final non-conference game of the year, that counts. I know you play Manitoba in that exhibition on January 3rd, and then you kind of hit the ground running. Then you go to Bowling Green. Then you play Northern Michigan. You play St. Thomas. You play Ferris at home. You play Michigan Tech again, Bowling Green. Like you talked about, there's some points to be had in the new year, culminating with the final trip down to Mankato to end the season on the last weekend of February. So there's an opportunity for them to pick some stuff up. They have an opportunity to maybe lick some wounds, rest up. And although this team's not significantly hurt, so I think it's a good opportunity for the team to rest up, like you mentioned. One final thing I do want to say, Saturday's game, I mean, the whole weekend felt weird overall as a series, but Saturday's game especially was weird. You talk about all the penalties that they had. You talk about just the things that had gone wrong for Bemidji State. Also the fact that they stopped the game because one of the creases came apart, like the glass came out, and they spent a very long amount of time doing that. And Ian, I'm sure you'll have a lot more to say on this than I will, but of course the broadcast, like sticking with it the whole time and not taking a break, really kind of confused me. And I'm just going to let you talk about the broadcast.
I almost forgot. I'm only going to say this because I don't have any intention of having them on our broadcast. This is my least favorite broadcast of all time, dude. I cannot stand Matt Pocket. I cannot stand him. Their play-by-play guy is not as bad, but when you put those two in the booth together, it's like I am rarely a guy that enjoys watching a game on mute, but I was like this close on Friday to like, it's like, dude, the same thing happened. Lake State's first goal, you couldn't really tell. It looked like it might not have hit the net. Was it off the post or not? They had to go review it. And they're like, I mean, I saw it from the get-go. I saw it hit the back of the net. It clearly went in. And then I think it was the Beavers' second goal that Jake McLean scored. Same thing. They didn't really see it on first glance. They had to go back and look at it. And they're like, I didn't see this one. They might be able to overturn it here. It's like, okay, and maybe they're telling the truth. Maybe they couldn't have seen it, but it's like, dude, what biggest homer I've ever heard in my life. So I wanted to give some, as you all know, listeners of this show, I am a certified hater of a lot of things, and you can add the Lake State broadcast to that long laundry list of items. And just one last thing on hockey before we maybe preview the women's series this weekend. We're exactly where we were last year. We have 16 points through 10 games, CJ. We had 16 points through 10 games last season.
But doesn't the vibe around this team this year feel so much different than the vibe from the team a year ago? Mainly because of non-conference play, but still.
Yeah, it's weird because you almost feel like obviously last year,
there was injuries.
Like, all right, we're in a good spot. And definitely the turning point is going to be this year weekend, right? Because last year going into the holiday break, we swept Bowling Green on home ice. We have an opportunity to sweep Michigan Tech on home ice this year and get to that, 22-point mark that we were at last year. The other big difference is there was not a team playing as well as Mankato was playing last year at this point. So it was still kind of a wide open race. Mankato's putting the pedal to the metal. We need some teams to help us out, and we need to do our job as well in terms of, taking points where we can get them. And honestly, this series against Michigan Tech is going to be very important. I mean, we said minimum 4 points last weekend, but this one feels a little bit more important. Like, legitimately, you got to take
considering how last weekend
majority
series
points.
Went, yes.
Exactly. And especially because Michigan Tech, Lake State's going to be up there too. It seems like, fighting for home ice, but Michigan Tech at home, you've got to take probably 5-6 points from this series if you want to jump back into this race like full time, honestly, because this Tech team is not necessarily playing perfect hockey. I think they had a pretty good weekend this last weekend. I'm pulling up the scores page because I honestly cannot remember how they did. I know they got majority points from their series. They played, oh no, they didn't. They split too. Yeah, they played St. Thomas, and St. Thomas kind of helped us out by splitting with Michigan Tech. So a team that's splitting with St. Thomas, a team that is getting swept by Minnesota State in Houghton. This is not a team right now that is exceedingly, overwhelmingly very good. So I think that this is a great opportunity, just like last year against Bowling Green, to get a sweep heading into this kind of holiday break before you get a couple weeks off. Again, before Minnesota Duluth.
Yeah, this is the time. Just to, again, not only to get the points and to be in the position you were a year ago, but also because you just don't play a ton after that. So if you kind of drop 2 or 3 and you go into the new year feeling, not that it's undoable, but you just for the vibe standpoint, we need this. We need this to go the way of the Beavers. So that'll happen over the weekend. And why don't we wrap things up, Ian, by talking a little women's hockey for this upcoming series that they have. If you look over, I'm waiting for my page to load up here. Currently, Bemidji State women's hockey at 3-12-1. Of course, they didn't play last weekend, and they're coming off that series in Duluth where they gave up 10 goals and only scored 1. Now their tide's hopefully going to turn a little bit. They also only have 3 games before the new year, but they're all on the road as they go down to Mankato this weekend for games being played at 3 in the afternoon and 2 in the afternoon on Friday and Saturday, respectively. Then they play the Gophers on January 1st as part of the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame Museum face-off in Lakeville. And then weirdly, they play the Gophers again for the Hockey Day Minnesota in Shakopee. So a weird year to play the Gophers for the women's hockey team. But focusing more on this series against Minnesota State, this feels like, again, like the series earlier, some of the series earlier in the season, where this maybe feels like an opportunity to nab some points.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, listen, Mankato's an improved squad. They're 6-9-1 overall, 2-9-1 in the conference. So a couple of those coming out of conference, and I'm not sure who they were against, but they'd have upset Ohio State this year. And whether Ohio State is a little bit down as a program this year compared to winning national championships or not, they're still a good program to be able to upset. So going into Mankato, this would be like a pretty big statement win. You saw the sweep over St. Thomas earlier where you picked up all 6 points. This is going to be just as big, being able to go on the road to a Minnesota State team who is right now in 6th. They have 10 points. Bemidji State has 6 in the WCHA. So if you could split with them this weekend and keep yourself on track to keep pace with them for a little bit here, I think that would be good. And again, this is still kind of the first year under Amber Fricklin. We just want to monitor how things are going. We don't want to see any huge, horrible results. Like we said, last week, really only seen 3 or 4 games, 3 games this year that you've really been disappointed with the outcome of it in terms of, 1-8 to Minnesota Duluth and a 0-6 to Wisconsin, that sort of thing. Other than that, it's been pretty consistent this year for this team under first-year head coach Amber Fricklin. So, yeah, and it'll be interesting, too, to see if it's rest or rust for this team, who is playing their only 2 games between November 24th and December 31st. They only have 2 games, and they're right here. They had 2 weeks off before this. They'll have 2 weeks off after this before they play Minnesota, and they have 3 games in 4 days playing against Minnesota and then Penn State and Brown. Yeah, back to back. So we'll have plenty more time to preview that. But yeah, women's hockey back in action this weekend. 3 o'clock on Friday in Mankato, 2 o'clock on Saturday in Mankato. So good luck to them.
Yeah, that pretty much covers it. Any other Bemidji State related things we need to go over? I think we've pretty much gotten everything. Of course, as soon as we hit end record and like an hour later, one of us will think of something, but I think we've touched on all the bases.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just it's a weekend to be a Beaver. Whatever happened, it didn't make me any less proud to be a Beaver. So an absolutely phenomenal season from the football team. And it's unfortunately time to dive completely headfirst into winter sports and only winter sports. It's always a little sad when the fall sports officially end for the year, but that's not to hate on the winter sports. It's just fall is such a successful time for this university. So hopefully winter can follow them with some surprises of their own.
Yeah, another busy week for Bemidji State, again, as we go completely into winter sports, and we'll see what happens. We'll be back next week for another episode. This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast. See you next